Formula One might be about to witness the biggest team switch in a decade, and no one saw it coming. Christian Horner, out at Red Bull, could be heading straight into Aston Martin's power seat. It sounds unthinkable until you connect the dots. Helmut Marko once warned the sport to take certain statements at face value. That same tone hangs over the paddock as a new rumour gathers speed. Christian Horner, freshly released from his Red Bull duties, is being tipped for a sensational switch to Aston Martin. On paper, it sounds outrageous. In practice, it lines up with several forces already reshaping Formula One. Aston Martin is spending big, Honda power is on the way, and Red Bull is beginning a new engine chapter with Ford. Put those threads together and you start to see why this whisper refuses to die. Long story short, here's the timeline. After 2 decades in charge and a record that includes 8 drivers' crowns and 6 constructors' titles, Horner was relieved of his operational role. Red Bull GmbH announced the change in early July and named Laurent Mekies as CEO of Red Bull Racing. That alone would be a thunderclap in any era. In this one, with the 2026 rules reset on the horizon and power unit alliances being redrawn, it's the starter's pistol for a frenzy of manoeuvring. Teams are not only building cars, they're building power structures and long-term identities. This is where Aston Martin steps in. The Silverstone operation has been on a rapid climb, underwritten by Lawrence Stroll's investment and now paired with a works Honda program from next season. Honda's return as a full factory partner gives Aston Martin a technical spine and a cultural anchor it hasn't enjoyed since the early Force India days. A seasoned political operator who knows how to integrate a manufacturer, motivate a growing workforce and defend a star driver's interests would be a perfect fit. That profile sounds familiar. It sounds like Horner. Juan Pablo Montoya poured fuel on the story when he said he could see Horner at Aston rather than Cadillac. He pointed to the years alongside Adrian Newey and the way that kind of partnership mindset could map onto what Aston is trying to build. It's more than a headline. It's a picture of how Aston Martin might professionalize the last 5% that separates regular podiums from sustained title pressure. You don't buy that final step off the shelf. You recruit it, layer in the Honda driver pipeline, and the story gains another dimension. Yuki Tsunoda is tethered less to Red Bull than to Honda, and his future inside the Red Bull ecosystem looks fragile, with Isaac Hadjar being evaluated as a possible Verstappen teammate in 2026. Helmut Marko has never been sentimental about these decisions. If a driver doesn't meet the bar, he moves on. Most 2026 seats are already settled, and the remaining openings favour drivers with either manufacturer backing or championship pedigree. For Tsunoda, that means Honda's path, which soon runs through Aston Martin. The talk in the paddock is simple. If Tsunoda can't secure a race seat, Honda could park him at Aston as a test and reserve driver. It keeps him inside the factory loop, lets him learn the car, and preserves a bridge back to the grid if circumstances change. History is unforgiving when it comes to comebacks. Yet a works reserve role is one of the few lifelines that actually lead somewhere. If Horner does arrive in Silverstone, the combination of a Honda-supported driver, a factory engine program, and an assertive senior leader would give Aston Martin a unified identity from the boardroom to the garage. None of this exists in a vacuum. Max Verstappen has given clarity for 2026, which stabilizes Red Bull in the near term. The question is, what follows once the new rules reveal who has nailed the concept? If Aston Martin hit the ground running with Honda, and a car influenced by lessons people like Adrian Newey have championed for years, the gravitational pull on top talent becomes real. A driver at the peak of his powers wants a car that matches his appetite for dominance. If that target shifts, loyalties can shift with it. That's not a slight on Red Bull, it's a recognition of how quickly eras can turn after a regulation reset. For Red Bull, the immediate challenge is structural. Mekies steps into a powerful executive seat. Technical groups must stay aligned. And the junior program has to produce a second driver who can live alongside Verstappen without draining points or soaking up strategy bandwidth. Red Bull have handled turbulence before, yet this is a different type of test. It's not only about lap time, it's about narrative control. Sponsors, staff and drivers need to feel the same certainty that defined the team from 2010 through 2013 and again in the Verstappen era. Any perception of drift and the market will probe for weak points. Look closely, and the practicalities of a Horner switch are not as outlandish as they sound. He lives within the motorsport corridor that stretches from Milton Keynes to Silverstone. The Aston Martin campus is expanding. The wind tunnel is online. Honda will bring people, processes, and a ruthless focus on power unit detail. A leader who can stitch those assets together, sell the vision to the paddock, and shield the race team from political shockwaves is exactly what this next phase requires. Horner lived that pressure for 2 decades and still turned it into silverware. There are, of course, hard realities. Contracts have teeth. Gardening leave provisions exist for a reason. Anti-poaching clauses surround key technical figures. Any move of this magnitude would need lawyers, NDAs, and patience. On the driver's side, Tsunoda would have to stand next to 2 entrenched names: Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. A reserve path makes sense in theory, but it still demands humility and consistency from a racer who has built his identity on aggression and spark. Even with Honda pulling, nothing is guaranteed. The broader competitive picture is what makes the rumour so compelling. 2026 represents a clean slate. Red Bull Ford is an unknown today, not because of doubt inside Milton Keynes, but because no one can be certain how the full powertrain and chassis integration will land until the car runs in anger. Aston Martin Honda has a clearer shape. It's a standard works model, and that model has a habit of producing synergy when the culture is right. Place a proven team boss on top of that stack, and you give yourself a faster route to coherence. Horner, Tsunoda, Aston Martin, Honda, and the question of where Verstappen's long game eventually points. Each piece matters on its own. Together, they form a scenario that would have sounded like fantasy 5 years ago, and now reads like a possible blueprint. None of it requires a collapse at Red Bull or a miracle at Silverstone. It only requires ambition, timing, and 2 or 3 key decisions to break a certain way. That's how power shifts happen in this sport. Quiet planning, then sudden clarity. Maybe the rumour fades, maybe it crystallizes. Either way, it reveals the fault lines that will define the next era. Works partnerships are back in fashion. Driver pipelines are owned by engine suppliers. Team principals are as much political operators as they are paddock generals. If Aston Martin truly intends to move from impressive project to perennial threat, adding a leader who has already built a dynasty would be the boldest possible statement. If Red Bull intends to extend their dynasty through a rules revolution, the response must be just as sharp. So picture it for a moment. A Honda-powered Aston Martin, an assertive hand on the tiller, a Japanese star waiting in the wings, and a grid reset that invites a new order. It's only a rumour today, yet it captures the energy of a paddock that can sense another turning point coming.